absolutely amazing cave. It's huge. We're just in the entrance now. It's going to get so much bigger.
That's amazing. Absolutely wonderful. This is definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'm so excited about being here.
Deep in the jungles of central Vietnam, scientists just opened a cave so enormous, it feels like stepping into another world. It is the Hang Son Doong, and inside it are underground rivers, mist that drifts like clouds, and even a hidden forest growing where the cave ceiling collapsed and sunlight pours in.
This is like a lost world. It's basically untouched by humans, which is very exciting. So we're the first people to come here.
But the deeper researchers went, the stranger it became, because somewhere in the darkness of this cave is something no one expected to find underground. The discovery of the world's largest cave, Hang Son Doong, sits inside Phong Ha Ke Bang National Park in Quang Binh Province, near the border with Laos. For a long time, this valley was mostly quiet farmland and forest, with a few known caves scattered through the hills. Even experts who had mapped other caves here had no idea that the biggest known cave passage on Earth was hiding under their feet, still dark, still unknown. The person who changed that was not a scientist at all, but a woodcutter trying to make a living. In late 1990, a local man named Ho Khan was deep in the jungle looking for eaglewood, a rare, fragrant wood he could sell. A storm rolled in over the limestone cliffs. Thunder hit, rain crashed down, and he ran for cover along the base of a tall rock wall. That was when he saw a narrow opening in the cliff and felt a strong wind blasting out of it, cold and constant as if the mountain itself was breathing. From somewhere inside came the roar of hidden water. Mist was blowing out past his face. He walked closer, looked down into the darkness and stopped. The drop was too steep, the wind too strange. Alone and scared of what might be down there, he backed away and kept walking. By the time he made it home, he could no longer describe exactly where that hole was. The jungle is full of ridges and deep cuts, and once the fog closes in, every line of cliffs can blur together. Then, visiting British cave explorers started working with Vietnamese partners to map caves in the park. They heard about the opening with wind and clouds coming out of it, and knew it sounded different. They asked Ho Khan to try to find it again. That simple request turned into a hunt that lasted most of 2 decades. Whenever he had spare time, Ho Khan went back into the jungle alone. He cut small marks into tree trunks to keep from getting lost, brushed off leeches, and followed the sound of water into one valley after another. Each time he thought he was close, the path slipped away, and he had to turn back. At last, in 2008, he walked into a remote valley and saw a shape that felt familiar. The same kind of cliff, the same deep cut in the rock, the same cold rush of air pouring past his face. This time he took note of every landmark he could see, then hurried back to town with the news. When British cave leader Howard Limbert returned to Vietnam in 2009, Ho Khan told him he had finally found the entrance again. A mixed team of British and Vietnamese cavers packed ropes, food, and survey gear, and followed him into the forest. Reaching that opening was not simple. The group hiked for days through wet jungle, crossed fast rivers on slippery stones, and pushed through sharp vines. They stayed in a minority village on the way in, then kept going until the forest sounds began to fade under the steady rush of hidden wind. At last they stood in front of a narrow black gap partway up a cliff, no bigger than the entrance to many other caves in the park. Nothing about it warned them that the space inside would rewrite world records. One by one, they clipped into their ropes, turned on their headlamps, and lowered themselves through the crack. There was a short drop, then another, then a sloping pile of boulders. As their eyes adjusted, something felt wrong. The light from their lamps never seemed to reach the far side. The ceiling above them disappeared into darkness. When they shouted to one another, their voices did not bounce back the way they did in normal caves. The sound just vanished upward. For hours, they walked and scrambled across a floor of broken rock, their lights sweeping past columns and towers that seemed to go on forever. They marked every bend and took careful measurements with laser tools and tape. The numbers they were getting did not make sense. The tunnel was simply too big. Then the group hit a dead end that did not look like a normal blockage. In front of them rose a smooth white wall of mineral, as high as a city building and slick with flowstone. It looked like a frozen waterfall that had hardened across the whole passage. They named it the Great Wall of Vietnam. Without gear to climb it safely, they had to turn back. Only after they left the cave, added up all their measurements and checked their maps did they realize what they had already walked through. The main tunnel they had just explored was larger than any other known on Earth. You could drop an entire city block from Manhattan into that space, skyscrapers and all, and still walk around them without touching the walls. You could line up around 15 Great Pyramids of Giza side by side, and the cave would still have room to spare. One section, called the Hope and Vision Passage, has an arch wide enough that a Boeing 747 could fly through it. That is how far past normal caves this place really is, but size is only the first shock. Son Doong also behaves like a tiny world with its own weather. Inside the main chambers, the air stays at about 73 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. Outside in central Vietnam, summer heat can push far above 90 degrees, while winter nights can feel chilly and damp. What does change is the mist and cloud that drift through the great hallways and pool under the ceiling like low rolling fog. Warm wet air from the jungle slides into the cave through its entrances and two giant holes in the roof. Deep inside, it meets colder rock and cooler air. Warm air hitting cold stone makes the water in it turn into tiny droplets, so fog banks and clouds form and float above the floor. In the hot months, clouds can roll through the chamber like slow-moving waves. Sometimes those clouds brush the top of the cave and break apart. When that happens, fine drops of water fall back down as light rain. People have stood on dry sand in Son Doong and felt rain fall only inside the cave while the forest above was quiet. The same steady airflow that frightened Ho Khan on his first visit makes it even more mysterious. As the air pressure outside rises and falls, the cave seems to breathe in and out. On some days, wind rushes out of the entrance and sends mist swirling into the trees. On other days, the air, along with the fog, is pulled back inside, drawn deep under the mountain once again. Those broken roof sections do more than feed clouds. They also let in enough light, soil and seed to build a hidden forest under the rock. One of the skylights opens onto a chamber so wide and green that early explorers joked it felt like a place where dinosaurs might still be hiding. The second major opening drops sunlight onto a steep slope of debris and soil that, over time, turned into a pocket rainforest at the bottom of the cave. Only small, tightly controlled tour groups are allowed into Son Doong each year, and they camp on sandbars near these openings for a night before hiking back out.
This cave is absolutely massive.
It's so pretty.
Yeah, it's huge. And look at the foliage in the back.
As wild as it is, Son Doong is only one piece of a much larger maze. The park around it covers more than 120,000 acres of mountains and jungle, and already holds over 400 known caves, including other giants such as Hang and Hang Pygmy. Even so, park managers and veteran cave teams think they have only scratched the surface, and estimate that roughly 70% of Phong Nha Ke Bang has never been properly checked for caves. The second major opening drops sunlight onto a steep slope of debris and soil that, over time, turned into a pocket rainforest at the bottom of the cave. Only small, tightly controlled tour groups are allowed into Son Doong each year, and they camp on sandbars near these openings for a night before hiking back out. As wild as it is, Son Doong is only one piece of a much larger maze. The park around it covers more than 120,000 acres of mountains and jungle, and already holds over 400 known caves, including other giants such as Hang and Hang Pygmy. Even so, park managers and veteran cave teams think they have only scratched the surface, and estimate that roughly 70% of Phong Nha Ke Bang has never been properly checked for caves. In just the past few years, British and Vietnamese teams have announced more than 20 new caves in and near the park, with a combined passage length of nearly 7 miles. Son Doong itself is still changing on paper. In 2019, cave divers followed its flooded tunnel and showed that the main passage links through an underwater corridor to a nearby cave called Hang Thung. That connection could add tens of millions of cubic feet to the total hollow space, meaning the cave system beneath this corner of Vietnam is even larger than anyone first thought. All that wonder leaves a stubborn question hanging in the air. How did a hollow this big ever form in the first place? And why has it not already crashed in on itself? How Vietnam's super cave was built. Long before anyone walked through Son Doong with ropes and headlamps, the ground under central Vietnam was a shallow sea.
British caver Howard Limbert has led 12 expeditions to Vietnam's limestone caves.
For hundreds of millions of years, tiny sea creatures, shells and mud settled on the seabed and slowly turned into a thick stack of rock. That rock is limestone, which is a soft kind of stone that water can slowly melt. The limestone in Phong Nha Ke Bang is some of the oldest in Asia. Experts say parts of it started forming around 400 million years ago, back in a time when this whole region was under warm ocean water. Much later, the ground did not stay flat. The hard outer shell of the planet, which is broken into huge, slow-moving slabs, pushed and folded this old seabed up. Over long periods of time, that pressure lifted the limestone into hills and mountains. The sea pulled back, and thick jungle spread over the new land. From that point on, the main artist was not fire or lava. It was rain. Every storm that rolled over the hills sent fresh water running into cracks. When rainwater picks up a little bit of gas from the air and from soil, it turns slightly sour. That weak acid is just enough to bite into limestone, grain by grain. If you give that process only a few years, you get a shallow groove. If you give it a few thousand years, you get a deep sinkhole or a cave you can crawl into. If you give it a few million years, the results start to look insane. Over long periods of time, that pressure lifted the limestone into hills and mountains. The sea pulled back, and thick jungle spread over the new land. From that point on, the main artist was not fire or lava. It was rain. Every storm that rolled over the hills sent fresh water running into cracks. When rainwater picks up a little bit of gas from the air and from soil, it turns slightly sour. That weak acid is just enough to bite into limestone, grain by grain.
Some stalagmites are sparkling in pure white because of the mineral type they're composed of.
It looks like a diamond.
Yes, it does.
If you give that process only a few years, you get a shallow groove. If you give it a few thousand years, you get a deep sinkhole or a cave you can crawl into. If you give it a few million years, the results start to look insane. Tests on sand and mud from its floor suggest that the hollow space started to open only about 2 to 3 million years ago, which makes it a young cave inside very old stone. Over that time, flowing water did almost all the hard work. Up on the surface, streams in this park seem normal. Two of them, called the Kei Rai River and the Rauthuong River, run through the forest and between cliffs like any other mountain water. Deep underground, they are part of a very different story. As rainwater gathered into these streams, some of the flow slipped down through cracks in the limestone and began to follow a long, deep split in the rock. A split like that is called a fault. It is a kind of scar in the crust where rock blocks have moved past each other. Along that scar, the stone was already weaker and easier to carve. For millions of years, water ran along that line, slowly biting deeper. Every drop that passed through carried away a tiny bit of dissolved rock. Over time, the crack opened into a tight tunnel, then into a passage large enough for an underground river. The Kei Ri and Rauthuong waters joined and pushed through, season after season, flood after flood. In places, the flow scraped the walls bare. In other spots, it undercut the sides and floor and then left blocks of stone to fall away. Son Doong is a solution cave, which means it grew mostly through this simple but steady action of water melting and carrying off limestone. No roof, no matter how strong, is perfect. Some parts of the ceiling above that growing tunnel were thicker and more solid. Other parts had more cracks or softer layers. As the hollow space below grew wider and the rock above was weakened by time and gravity, a few of those weak spots finally gave out. Huge chunks of ceiling crashed down, blocked the passage for a while, and then were gnawed away by more floods. Each collapse opened a wide throat all the way up to the surface. These are the giant pits that now act as windows into the cave. In science papers, they are called dolins, but you can think of them as sinkholes, where the roof simply could not take its own weight anymore. When you look at Son Doong today, it is the end result of all those steps. Pools inside the cave hold calcite towers that rise more than 200 feet into the air. These are stalagmites, rock columns that grow upward when mineral-rich water drips from the ceiling and leaves behind a thin layer each time it falls. Over years and centuries, those layers build up, one on top of another. In most caves, stalagmites are about the height of a chair or a person. In Son Doong, some of them are as tall as office buildings. To an engineer, a room that wide and tall inside solid rock looks like it should not last. Roofs sag, arches crack under their own weight, bridges fail when their supports are too thin. But Son Doong has a few things in its favour. First, the limestone above the main passage is still very thick in most places. That gives the rock arch enough strength to spread the load. Second, the shape of the tunnel helps. The ceiling is curved, not flat. That curve lets weight flow down into the side walls, the same way a stone bridge or temple arch stays up even after many years. Third, some of the weak zones have already been removed. Where the ceiling was too thin or cut up by cracks, it has already fallen and opened those wide holes to the surface. What stands now is the tougher survivor rock. The huge white flow of mineral that the first team named the Great Wall of Vietnam also tells part of this story. It is a sloping ramp made of smooth calcite. It formed when water rich in calcium flowed over a drop in the cave floor and slowly left behind a thin layer of stone. Over time, those layers built up into a solid sheet. Nearby you can find cave pearls, which are smooth, round balls of mineral that form in shallow pools. Here's how they form. A tiny grain of sand or a small chip of rock sits in gently moving water. Drops fall from above, leave behind a thin ring of calcite, and then the water rolls that little grain over. After years of this steady drip and turn, the grain slowly grows into a pearl the size of a marble, sometimes even as large as a baseball. Nothing planned it. It is simply gravity and chemistry repeating the same quiet process again and again over long stretches of time. Even the way the cave seems to breathe has a simple cause. Air inside a cavern has weight, just like water does. Outside, the air above the jungle is always changing in pressure, as weather systems move by and as day turns to night. When outside air becomes heavier than the air inside, it starts to push inward through every opening. When the air outside lightens, the air inside flows back out. In a narrow cave, you may hardly notice this. In a monster passage like Son Doong, the same small pressure change can drive a strong, steady wind. That is why people feel air rushing past them at the entrance or see mist push through the skylight holes. Sound also behaves oddly in a space like this. In a small room, your voice bounces off walls and comes back as a clear echo. In Son Doong, the walls and ceiling are so far apart and the surfaces are so broken that some sound gets lost among the cracks and side chambers. A shout can travel off into the dark, bounce around, and then slide back to you from some other direction with a strange delay. That can make it feel like there is something else moving in the darkness when it is really your own voice. All of this is still just stone, water, and time. Yet Son Doong is not only a story about rock, it is also home to its own small world of plants and creatures, and it has a way of getting inside the heads of the people who spend days and nights in its darkness. What lives in the dark of Son Doong life, under the broken roof of the cave, does not behave as if it is trapped. It behaves like it owns the place. Up on the jungle floor in central Vietnam, you see thick trees, vines, and hot air. Drop down through one of the giant roof holes above Son Doong, and you land in a pocket of green that feels like it should not exist there at all. There are real trees reaching several stories high, ferns as big as small cars, moss that covers every rock, and vines hanging down from the lip of the opening like someone pulled the jungle curtain halfway shut. Scientists nicknamed one of these spots the Garden of Eden, and it really does feel like a piece of rainforest that someone picked up and hid inside stone. That little forest did not grow by magic. For thousands of years, seeds have been dropping through those roof holes the same way dust falls through a crack in your ceiling. Wind pushes pollen in, bats fly in and out, carrying fruit and insects. Birds and monkeys hang around the edge of the sinkhole and drop seeds without caring where they land. When heavy rain hits the jungle above, small floods pour soil, tiny creatures and plant scraps down into the cave. Over a very long time, that steady trickle built a real, working ecosystem under the rock. The national park around Son Doong is already packed with rare life. Red-shanked duke monkeys, gibbons, and other threatened primates climb the ridges above, while rare birds and bats sweep over the canopy. Some of that life now has 1 foot in the cave and 1 foot in the outside world. Near the forested roof holes, people have spotted flying squirrels gliding past shafts of light, snakes warming on rocks, and even monkeys watching the expeditions from the upper ledges, like curious neighbours peeking over a fence. Closer to the dark zones, the game changes. Inside Son Doong and nearby caves, scientists have already found several species that seem to belong only to this underground world. Their bodies are pale or see-through, their eyes are tiny or gone, and they move like they were built for slow, careful travel in tight spaces. Survey teams have reported at least 7 new animal species in and around Son Doong alone, including small fish, millipedes, spiders, scorpions, rock geckos, and even tiny lice that cling to cave creatures instead of living on the surface. In the park as a whole, recent studies have counted more than 200 insect species, over 140 kinds of butterflies, and dozens of spiders and land snails in the cave systems and the forests above them. And researchers keep adding new names to the list every year. To understand how strange this really is, it helps to look at cave animals from other parts of the world. In Mexico, there is a fish called the Mexican tetra that comes in 2 very different versions. The river version has eyes and normal silver scales. The cave version is ghost white and completely blind, with eye sockets covered by skin. It has traded sight for a super sharp sense of touch and water pressure. It feels tiny changes in the water and can dodge rocks and find food in total darkness. In the limestone caves of Slovenia and Croatia, there is a salamander called the Olm. It looks like a pale baby dragon with feathery red gills, can live more than 100 years, and spends its entire life in underground lakes. It has no working eyes, but it is very good at sensing tiny electrical fields and small waves in the water. Across the cave world, you see the same pattern again and again. Insects and spiders lose their colour and eyes, and grow long antennae and extra hairs that act like radar. Shrimp and crabs in underground rivers become see-through and move more slowly to save energy. Salamanders keep their gills and never grow into the land-walking adult stage that their cousins reach outside. The strangest cave life is sometimes too small to see. On bare rock walls, on wet mud, and hanging from ceilings, caves can be covered with thin films and slimy blobs of tiny living things that do not need sunlight at all. These microbes, tiny bacteria and fungi you need a microscope to see, can live on minerals and chemical energy in the rock. Studies in many karst caves have shown thick mats of bacteria, algae, and fungi growing in places with almost no food from the surface, getting their energy from things like sulfur, iron, or other dissolved chemicals in the water. In a cave in Mexico, for example, there are soft white blobs called snotites that hang from the ceiling like wet stalactites. They are made of acid-loving bacteria that eat sulfur in the rock and drip waste as strong as battery acid. A few sealed caves go even further and run almost their whole food chain on this kind of chemistry. Movel Cave in Romania sat closed off from the surface for about 5.5 million years. Its air is low in oxygen and rich in hydrogen sulfide, the gas that smells like rotten eggs. Yet the cave is full of worms, spiders, and small crustaceans that live on thick layers of microbes growing in the water. Those microbes get their energy not from light, but from chemical reactions with sulfur and other compounds bubbling up from below. In Israel's Ayalon Cave, another completely dark system, bacteria that feed on minerals in the groundwater form the base of the food web, and explorers have already found at least 8 new invertebrate species there, including a blind scorpion. These sealed caves show that once you give tiny life forms water, rock, and a little chemical energy, they build whole communities. No sunlight needed. All of this is why caves pull in people who think about life on other worlds. Space agencies and research teams now treat Earth's caves as practice zones for places like Mars. Recent work has focused on lava tubes, long tunnels left behind when flowing lava drains away and leaves a hollow channel. On Mars, orbiters have spotted dark pits on the sides of big volcanoes like Asia Mons that look a lot like lava tube skylights on Earth. Scientists point out that underground spaces like this would be shielded from harsh surface radiation and wild temperature swings, just like caves on our planet. Reviews in astrobiology journals over the last few years argue that cave microbes, especially those that live off rock and chemical energy instead of sunlight, are some of the best guides we have for what hidden life on Mars or icy moons might look like. Teams in the United States and Europe have even driven small cave rover robots into lava tubes on Earth to practice looking for microbe-rich crusts and chemical clues the way we might one day search Martian caves. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.